Welcome to Fabric Monday. Today we'll talk about database and warehouse auditing. The auditing features in both Fabric database and warehouses is very similar. Let's talk about them. Fabric database, they are based on Azure SQL. The underlying technology is Azure SQL, but Fabric database are the new management layer over the Azure SQL. I talked about this on previous videos. In Azure SQL, we have the auditing feature, but the auditing information needs to be stored in blob storage or in log analytics, for example. In Fabric, we can enable the auditing and Fabric manage the storage for us. We don't care about exactly where it's stored. Fabric manage for us. We don't care about blob storage or log analytics. The audit logs are stored in one lake and we can query them. Let's see how to enable the audit in a Fabric database. Here we can see a Fabric database. This database has only one table, but it's enough for our example. The audit in Fabric database are coming enabled by default. We can see them in Security, Manage SQL Auditing. What I was saying, the auditing in SQL database are enabled by default, and they are enabled as a full audit everything by default. There is a retention period which is set by default as 1 day, and I can change this retention period. I can specify for how long I would like to keep the audit information. Years, months, I can select that. I can change the auditing, change what I'm auditing. Instead of auditing everything, I can choose some presets of queries that I can audit. Schema changes, data reads and writes, permission changes, what exactly I would like to audit. I can also select custom events to be audited. There is a set of custom events and I can select to audit these kinds of custom events, each one representing one operation. Let's continue with the auditing of all the events, and let's take a look on the predicate expression. I can add a predicate expression to filter the auditing events that will be actually saved to the one lake. So I can choose to create a predicate. For example, take a look on the example. A statement not like this one or not like this one. In this case, it's excluding two kinds of statements from the auditing. But I can use this as well to include some kind of statement in the auditing. So I can use this as a filter for the audit. This is very powerful. And then we save our configuration. That's it. The auditing is saved. So the process of enabling the audit is simple. We navigate to Security in the Fabric database, enable the auditing logging, and configure the logs, the events that we want to log, and save the auditing configuration. What the options do we have? We have the option to audit everything, audit all the events. Predefined scenarios, we have some predefined scenarios there that we can choose. Custom action groups and predicate filtering. We can use predicate filtering to filter the audit. And we also need to configure the retention policy of the audit. For how long will we keep the information we are auditing? Then, how do we retrieve the information about the audit? How do we query the audit? We need to query the audit using a SQL query. We have a function called sysfn get audit file v2. This function will retrieve the audit information from the file saved by Fabric. The only thing we need to know is the location of these files. You don't need to care about how Fabric is saving them, but we need to know the location so we are capable to retrieve the audit information. And how is this location? You can see here in the query, this location depends on the workspace ID and database ID. So we need to use the workspace ID and database ID to retrieve the auditing files. In this query, we can choose to retrieve all the records or filter the records according to an start and end date, for example, helping to retrieve only a subset of the information that we have saved. So we need the workspace ID, we need the database ID to retrieve the audit. Then the first two parameters we always use the full, and then the last two parameters we define the dates, start and end date. The filtering option with start and end date can be very helpful if the amount of information we are querying is too huge. Let's see how to query the audit. I'm back to Fabricate database. I have a query here to retrieve the information from the audit. It's exactly doing what I explained, using the function to query the location of the files, and the location of the files depends on the IDs, the workspace ID and the object ID of this database. This information is retrieved from the URL. When we are accessing the database, the first expression after the groups is the workspace ID. And the second expression after SQL Database is the database ID, the object ID of the database. In this way, we retrieve these two expressions from the URL to make the query on the audit. In this query, I included an order by, so I can see the last statements executed. And here I'm seeing the last statements executed, the most recent ones. And one of the fields that we have here is the statement. Recently I executed against the table comments. So we have here my query against the table comments. And many information about the execution of this query, how this query was executed and who executed this query. Of course, we can filter some fields. We don't need always to bring out fields. We can choose some of these fields to bring us the return of the audit. Now let's talk about warehouse auditing. Warehouse auditing is very similar. One feature that warehouse auditing doesn't have is the predicate filter. Warehouse auditing doesn't have the predicate filter. For all the rest, it's very similar to the database auditing. Let's see how the warehouse auditing works. Here I have a warehouse. The auditing is hidden inside settings. So let's get to settings. And then we have the SQL audit logs. I can enable or disable the SQL audit logs at any moment. So disable, and if I enable again, it opens the last configuration I used and I can edit. It has a set of predefined events, many predefined events which I can choose if I audit all of them or only some of them. The log retention, but we don't have a predicate to filter the audit. There is no predicate to filter the audit. I didn't change anything, so it's only giving me the discard option, and the auditing the lakehouse is enabled. Let's execute one query. Let's start from DBO geography, and now let's query the audit information. This is a copy of the statement from the SQL database, but I need to copy the correct values for the warehouse, the workspace ID, the workspace ID to the query, and the warehouse ID, to the query. Let's execute. There it is, my warehouse auditing information, and here we have the last few SQL statements recorded in the audit. And here is my sample query. I select the star from geography, from the view geography. In this way, we just saw how to enable the auditing in database, Fabric database, and warehouse, and how to query the data from this audit. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next week.